got it on airplane mode. Like, it went right.
All right, cool. So we're not starting yet. Or did you turn it on already?
I just turned it on slightly before, so there's a little bit of it.
Oh, okay.
Also,
Well,
they can log on.
We still probably have 30 seconds, so. There we go. It is 4 o'clock. Okay. Good evening, everybody. So, first of all, I'd like to say hello to everybody who is joining us here in the classroom at the UW-Stevens Point campus. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to all of you who are joining us via YouTube. So this is being live streamed via the College Natural Resources YouTube channel. So those of you who are on YouTube, there is a chat feature. So if you want to ask questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat feature at any time, and we'll read them off on the end, or at the end. But you are here for the final seminar in the CNR 2023 Seminar Series. This series is titled The Science and Culture of Black Bears, Human Perspectives on a Large Carnivore. And so before I introduce our speaker for today, I'd like to just go through a few acknowledgments. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everybody at the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife. Scott Hinkstrom is the director of this center, and he is an extension specialist, so much of the work that we do is UW Extension related, so we'd like to thank our folks at UW Extension. These seminar series are done every spring, and they're always done in cooperation with the College of Natural Resources here on campus. So I'd like to thank everybody in the CNR office and everybody in the College of Natural Resources for their assistance and their cooperation with developing this seminar series. And then, of course, I'd like to thank the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, particularly Randy Johnson, who is a bear or large carnivore specialist with the DNR. They helped us identify speakers and helped us plan this series. So I'd like to give a special thanks to them for assisting us with planning this. And then, of course, I'd like to say thank you to Katie Sartini, our assistant professor of wildlife, who is the Black Bear project leader, and she played a pivotal role in planning this series as well. So thank you to everybody. And if I didn't introduce myself, my name is Jennifer Summers. I am the Program Development Specialist for the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife, and this is one of the projects that I work on as well, is the seminar series. And so, of course, it's always important to acknowledge that we are on land that was not originally ours. So we recognize the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point occupies lands of the Ho-Chunk and Menominee people. Please take a moment to acknowledge and honor the ancestral Ho-Chunk and Menominee land and the sacred land of all indigenous peoples. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Katie Sartini, who is going to introduce our speaker today.
All right, everyone. Today we're here with Waabishkaa Binesikwe. Binesikwe. I'll get it. I'll get it. And I have a bio here that she provided to us, but then she just told me she's going to be telling you her story. So instead of reading you the bio that she provided, I'm going to let her tell her story, and I'm going to tell you instead why she's here today. How about that? We first started working with Tanya a couple years ago when we started the Blackberry Ecology class, and the reason that we started working with Tanya in particular is because every year I ask students in the Blackberry Ecology class, what is it that you want to learn about bears? And they said, we want to learn about bears and human culture. And I thought, how am I going to do that? I don't know about bears and human culture. And that's how I ended up meeting Tanya, and she's been a tremendous resource to us, and a good friend, and someone who can really rock a mohawk, I have to say, as well. So I'm really looking forward to this. I'm very happy we were able to reschedule her talk so that she's able to be here in person. And I'm just going to go ahead and let you tell your story. Okay. Does that sound good?
Yes. Right, good. There you go. Okay. I'm going to clip this on because I want to hold it the whole time.
Do you need this so that you
Yeah.
can know?
So I remember what I wrote. She actually asked me, she goes, did you write that? I'm like, yeah, it's been a while though. I think I did all that. Bonjour, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Bonjour, Waabishkaa Binesikwe, Anishinaabe, Makade, Makwa, and Dudame. Hold on. Can everyone hear me? Well, you guys hear me. I can hear me. Buju Waabishkaa Binesikwe Indigenous Makade Makwa Indudame Ga Kiwe Onaning and Dunjaba. My English name is Tanya Aldred. My culture, Ojibwe culture. I'm from Keweenaw Bay in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Part of our culture is that we introduce ourselves in our native language, which is Ojibwe. And so what I just said, converted back to English, is hello everyone. My name, my spirit name is, I'm known to the spirits and others as White Thunderbird Woman. I am from the Black Bear Clan, and I'm from the place across the water. So if you look in the Upper Peninsula, and anyone from Michigan has a map of Michigan. So I'm from right up there, like right in the bay, the big bay of Keweenaw Bay, and it's beautiful. I love Lake Superior. I've grown up on it, on and off my whole life, and I just keep coming home to it. So just wanted to introduce myself and go into my background a little bit. The reason I don't have a PowerPoint, one, my PowerPoint, I just took 2 exams. I'm back in school again as a post-baccalaureate in psychology. I was a wildlife biologist for a while, wildlife technician. I'll get into that a little bit. So part of I did have a PowerPoint, and it got corrupted. And I'm like, I went to the IT office, like, can you help get this back? It's like an hour-long presentation, but I also take it as, and they couldn't do anything. So I just took it as, I'm not meant to give a PowerPoint. And I have given presentations like this before, and it's an oral culture. It's taught by stories. It's taught down through generations. And you're never given the answers, right? You know, like you're not taking an exam and you're given the answers. You're given a story, and you got to figure out what it means for you. So I'll talk a little bit about that and my experiences. So when I started college, I graduated with my bachelor's from Michigan State University. I know, don't be hating in Michigan. But, so I was a Spartan, still love the Spartans. But, and I graduated in wildlife management and ecology in 2001. After that, I left, and through the last year, I did a program, environmental management in Northwestern Australia. So we went from study abroad program. We went through from Darwin all along the West Coast down to Perth. And it was an amazing experience. I met some amazing people, and ended up moving over there after I graduated in 2001. And so I had my bachelor's. I did some volunteer work till I had my green card to work over there. They don't call it a green card, but something similar. And I did some volunteer work for conservation and land management, which is similar to the DNR here. Did reptile studies, entered data, went out, did some pitfall traps. So got to see some pretty amazing and dangerous critters over in Western Australia. I was living in Kalgoorlie, Boulder, which is 8-hour drive inland. And you think 8-hour drive, and it's like being on another planet. And that's only the beginning of the outback. There's warnings on highways in Australia of like, don't go on this unless you have extra gas and water. Like, there's a whole lot of just vastness. I also volunteered for the Bunbury Dolphin Discovery Center in Bunbury on the west coast, south of Perth. So I got to work with wild dolphins in the Indian Ocean, making sure that the tourists didn't, do any bad things or try to touch them or anything like that. But I felt like a tourist myself, but I just had the right degrees, the want to work, the drive to work. So anyone who wants to get into wildlife work, and I didn't start off as a wildlife biologist. I had to work my way. You have to do a lot of volunteer work. So once I came back to the States, I came back in 2003, and I started working for Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. And I started there as a technician, but before that, I volunteered for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, working with sea lamprey. And, everyone's like, oh, that's not great. I was flying out dead sea lamprey looking for coated wire tags. And I went through thousands. And I realized, that I'm going through all these, and I didn't find one coated wire tag. That means there's a lot of sea lamprey out there. So that's what, and you start to put this stuff together of taking classes and whatever, and how does this work in the real world? And that's why you need to volunteer, get in there, get your name known, and that's the best way to do it. So then coming up to, worked as a technician for Gliffwick, and a couple years into it, there's, in 2007, I was thinking about, started there in 2004 and 2007. It perfectly coincided, there was a American marten translocation effort. Martens are endangered in Wisconsin, stayed endangered, but they're not endangered. They're harvested for their fur in Minnesota and Michigan, and we were trying to figure out why their numbers aren't holding in northern Wisconsin. So I decided that'd be perfect time for my master's work. So then I went to Purdue University, and that's where I got my master's in wildlife science. And did a lot of great work, got to do a lot of backtracking in the woods. So I got a lot of experience there working by myself, tracking, and someone else had put collars on them already. So I got, radio telemetry work, and I also helped with the class for the bear ecology class with that too. And it's fun to, because I messed up too. I hadn't been locating animals for a while, and I'm like, I don't know, it kind of sounds like over there. And we were way off. But I realized also when I was doing that kind of work, the signal can bounce off hills and everything. Unfortunately, I never got to work with bears, but I've seen plenty of bears. I have a story about that. So after that, I came back to Gliffwick. That's the acronym for Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. I graduated in 2011 with my master's from Purdue, and then worked as a wildlife biologist, working with fisher, otter, bobcat, and martens. And then kind of moved around a little bit, stayed there for a little bit, left. My mother was ill, helped her out with some things over in Michigan. So I'd left. I worked back with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service doing sea lamprey control as a biological technician, still looking for full-time work. Came back over to Wisconsin, worked for the Park Service, Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, and that was in 2015 and 2016. And so eventually I'll get to the bears when we talk about bears, but just a little bit of background of, my work in wildlife wasn't a straight line. Things come into your life and happen. So you just kind of got to go with it and volunteer and, take other jobs that maybe you don't want to take. And, I had moved out. I had an experience at the Apostle Islands I was doing as a biological tech, got some great experience there, banding eaglets, which was unreal. And one of the other technicians was like, you have like 1,000 mosquitoes on your forehead. And I looked at them as I'm holding the claws of this eaglet. And I'm like, what mosquitoes? Because you'll get eaten alive by a lot of bugs. That's just, I don't know how much blood I've donated. That's what I call it. I'm donating blood every day I go out in the field. And they love me. I must have the right blood. So I got to do that, did some camera work with Northland College up there, Northland College students as well. I've also worked as with a lot of UW-Madison students, Purdue students as a biologist, and they were technicians or interns for the summer, undergraduates. So I got to do a lot of small mammal trapping, all that kind of work. I got to help out just a couple years ago working with some more small mammal trapping in northern Wisconsin, assisting with winter trapping, using culverts, got that experience, and became the former wolf biologist, had left Gliffwick, so then I got wolves thrown onto my plate too. Just take wolves. They're all furry, and so it was a lot more work, and that was right when they were delisted, and so it was crazy and pretty emotional for me because wolves have a special relationship, a very tight-knit relationship with Ojibwe tribes, and the hunt that took place was just devastating for a lot of people. And whether you're tribal or not, it was devastating from a conservation perspective and everything. It was just brutal what happened. But and people are like, well, I left for my own reasons, but I'm back in now as a post-baccalaureate at Northern Michigan University and just starting into psychology. And the nice thing about being a post-baccalaureate, I don't have to take all the other classes. I just get to take psychology. And what I kind of want to do is that I realize, I've been, in therapy for many years and trying to figure out the trauma that I went through growing up, you know, just different time period. I'm 47 years old. I went through some pretty heavy stuff in my younger years. And had to learn this my own way and learn the culture and learn. I always had this connection, but I never understood it. So I had to figure it out for myself because I didn't always have teachers. But, or people guiding me through the tribe. You know, I didn't grow up. I was on and off the reservation quite a bit. But so getting back to bears, right? So one of my first experiences, I knew I was Bear Clan. I had my naming ceremony in, let me think back, 2005. I had my naming ceremony. That's where I was given White Thunderbird Woman. I had a vision about it, and I was the Black Bear Clan. Usually in our culture, you follow your father's clan. Well, I never knew my real dad. So I had someone search for him, you know, search for that, you know, get those energies coming in, and that's what he was told, which makes sense because it's, you know, I never thought about it. Dr. Sartini wasn't sure how to say Baraga, and I was like, oh, it's like bear, you know, Baraga. But there's also Beartown there, and it just made sense that I have a lot of relatives, and we're all Bear Clan. And so part of going into being Bear Clan, there's a lot of energies associated with that. In our culture, there's various type of animal clans. So you're from this tribe, but there's Wolf Clan, Bear Clan, let's see, I think there's Bobcat, Lynx, Martin Clan, American Martin, the animal, not the bird, because there's a pine marten bird. Let's see, I think there's crane. There's a lot of other, you know, smaller clans that I'm not as familiar with. But I found out it was Bear Clan, but I still didn't know what that meant to me. And suddenly, when I was working with, I was working for the Paso Islands National Lakeshore. On July 10th, I had the most phenomenal experience like a lot of people could ever have. And I was working alone on Oak Island, and I know a lot about the wildlife because I helped set up the cameras and go through the data. And those islands, there's a lot of bears on those islands, and we've seen some wolves. That's when they found, for years back when I was doing my master's, we didn't think there were martens out there. They had brought them back in, you know, when was it, the 70s or something like that. They put some on the islands, and then they couldn't find any, and they weren't sure they were out there. Now we know from the camera work, they're on several of the islands out there. So that was pretty neat to, you know, be back there and be like, wow, I was wrong in half of my presentations because we didn't know. And so on July 10th, 2015, one of my coworkers, another technician, we were doing plant surveys, understory browse surveys of deer, because there's deer on several of the islands out there, and they browse, they love Canada U. And so some of the islands don't have Canada U. It's like candy to deer, they just love it. And some of the islands that they've culled all the deer off, that stuff grows, it's like bushwhacking through like shrubbery like this. And you know, it's hard to walk through, you can't even get through it, it's amazing. But I was on Oak Island, I was working by myself because my coworker, she went home early for the weekend. And I was like, I got this, there's hardly any U here, so you just measure the plants, and you get dropped off on a boat, you have a walkie-talkie, and you go to your GPS locations, do your sampling, get off the other side of the island, radio for the boat, they come pick you up. So I did one plot by myself, it went pretty quick because there's no U there, but you identify other plants and stuff. And so I got to this point where you're always off trail, you're just kind of bushwhacking out there. You get to this point where there's a huge ravine. And do I go around the ravine? Way around, and there's huge hemlock and white pine, or do I go down and up? I was like, well, I'm gonna go the short way, even though it's harder. I'm gonna go down and up the other side. So as I was going down in there, I seen a huge bear the day before. And that always made me a little nervous, and the tribes and people that I talked to, they're like, you're Bear Clan, you shouldn't be afraid of bears. That's your family. And I was like, I don't know, there's some family I don't get along with either. But, you know, I was like, I don't know, they're just big and, you know, and intimidate me a little bit. So I went down into the bottom of the ravine, and suddenly, once you work enough in the woods, you get a sixth sense. You're like, something else is here. And usually you freak yourself out, and I see a dark lump, and it's a stump, you know, or something like that. And you start visualizing animals, and it's like, oh, it's a deer or something like that. Well, suddenly I looked behind me, and I was already in the bottom, and I saw probably a 3 or 4 year old male. I ended up finding out it was male later, but just a black bear coming down, and it was coming towards me. And I'm like, my heart started racing. I'm like, okay, you know, you got this. And hey, bear, and talking to him, and it came closer and closer and closer. So I was like, it's okay, and you know, just kind of slowly walk away. We're all cool here. You're cool. I'm cool. You know, my heart's like just pounding. And so I just went to slowly walk up the other side, and that bear took off to the top of the hill and stopped at the top of the hill and started back and forth. And I'm not on a path, but it was definitely on the path I was going, backing up the hill. Right then, I was like, oh, my adrenaline dump. I pulled the bear spray out, and I had it loaded, ready to go. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to use this. And I didn't use it until that bear came up. I could have touched his face by the time I used it. And I was just like, and I realized that bear was unfazed by that spray. Next time, I'm just going to spray myself so I can't see where the bear is, and I won't be as scared. But, you know, what it did was just upset the bear at that point. And I had no food on me, nothing like that. I don't know why it behaved this way. It was very healthy, because I know to look for a sick animal. Sick animal can be very unpredictable. And it circled and circled and did false charges. And this happened for over an hour. I unloaded that whole can on that bear, and it didn't care. I was radioing out. I couldn't get out of the ravine. And I realized because it was circling, it wasn't a female with cubs. A female will just charge you to get you away from her cubs. And I didn't see any cubs. And if it's circling, it wouldn't put me purposely in between me and her cubs. So I learned that real fast, and I was like, it was a male. And just like young males, teenagers, they can be bothersome. And it was just probably just curious about me. And so I learned real fast about bears, and I witnessed some of the behavior that I've never seen before. Some people I've talked to bear biologists, they had never witnessed it, or it's not written in any book. And the false charges, the jaw snapping, and within feet of me. And one thing that it would do a stiff-legged gait. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, where they're stiff and they start, and it's huffing when it's doing that, which is, I'm only 5'2", you know, with my mohawk, I'm like 5'5", but you know, I was terrified. I mean, my heart was just, I could feel it pounding on my chest, and everyone's like, well, just be calm, stay calm. Did you try to appear bigger in it? I'm like, that is an intelligent animal. I don't care if I put my backpack above my head, it's gonna know how big I am. And another thing that it did that no one had seen before, it would go up to a tree and reach up as tall as it could. And I realized I didn't realize this till later, not at the moment, because I was terrified, but it was posturing. It was showing me how big it was. Look at me, look what I can do. And then reach up and look over at me, and I'm 5 feet away from it, and he would throw his body down and slam his paws down. And I'm just like, jeez. And I realized after all this had happened, I had made my way out to the beach. And I'm out there, I'm not getting in the water, they're better swimmers than us. And I just went through this, and it charged me one last time. And I had no spray on me, I was just like, here it comes. And I realized the thing that it was, with the fear that I had, I was afraid I was gonna get mauled. I was afraid about the pain that I was about to go through in the middle of the woods, and would anyone find me? That was it. That was the fear and that was the purest bit of fear I've ever felt. Even scarier than being up here and talking in front of you guys. Like, I get a little nervous and whatever, but nothing like that day. And finally the boat comes, right? I'm like, where have you guys been? But you don't realize how small you look on that island. You know, you're out there, you know, you're like, I'm right here. But so that lesson, it was a teaching. It was a strong teaching. I went to a lot of biologists. I went to a lot of elders, tribal elders, and it was interesting the differences that I got from a lot of people. a lot of biologists were like, wow, what an amazing experience. And, you know, one of the biologists I talked to, you know, well, because at one point the bear fell down. I fell down because I was backing up, and there was, at the bottom of a ravine, I fell over. And he was like, and the bear had jumped up and it fell over. And I made sure to get away a little bit while he was on his back and not looking. And one of the biologists, he's a retired biologist, he goes, well, did you get a look at his gonads? Because they would have been swollen because it was that time of year, he's ready to mate. And I'm just like, I'm not looking for a bear's gonads, I'm sorry. You know, I'm like, I'm terrified, and I don't know, John. Yeah, so, okay. And, but then it was interesting, the tribal view I got. The tribal view was not gentle. It was like, what have you been doing in your life? You are doing something wrong to get a message that strong. And I had to leave. I wasn't meant to be there anymore. I worked there for another year, and it took me a while. I still have PTSD about bears, and I would love to come along and do some bear stuff to get, I think that would help get over that fear. But going into bear clans and learning about it, and, you know, looking at what they do, like some of the, when I first went to the bear, what is it, the bear, what's it called? The workshop you do in the summer? The workshop. Is a bear workshop. So for the undergrad students. And it was amazing how, as a technician, I worked on this project at that school there, that facility. I went into the classroom, and I was like, they have some of the digital herbarium specimens. I worked on that project back in 2004. And I'm like, wow, so the work I've done, people are actually seeing it, you know, almost, you know, 20 years later. That's unreal. And I was like, oh, I wasn't wasting my time, and I wasn't into plants, you know, but it made me realize that my whole journey through all this, you have to learn the plants to understand the habitat and what the animals are doing and why they're there, or why they're not there, what's missing from that habitat. And so I started to make these bigger connections. And we read about it, but I can read about it all day. I don't learn it until I actually experience it and do it. And of course, that lesson, I'm still learning lessons from that bear experience. And it was beautiful. I started dancing within a couple weeks of that. I never danced before, and got my regalia on, made my regalia in 3 days. And one of my teachers was like, why now? Why are you choosing to dance now? You've had your whole life. You're like 40 years old, and why are you dancing now? I was like, because I used to be afraid to dance. And I realized how ridiculous that sounded. I'm like, you're afraid to dance? Because I didn't dance as well as that person, or my regalia is not as nice, or whatever. And I had all these wrong things in my head. And then, but I was like, that fear compared to the fear I experienced, that was a beautiful lesson. I had to be taught that's fear. That's real fear. I'm like, I got this dancing, even if I don't do it right, you know? But so like with the bear clan, I learned that they're the protectors. They're the protectors of the plant beings. And I'm like, that's interesting. I had to learn all my plants. You know, everyone wants to, what they term the big sexy animals. Everyone wants to work with bears or wolves or whatever, the big ones. And it's like, you have to work your way up to that, you know. You slowly get into that. And you start with plants. Then you start with small mammal trapping, especially if you're working with mid-sized carnivores like martens, like I was doing. And you'll measure logs, and like I said, giving your blood up to the ticks and the mosquitoes. Why am I out here? Why are we measuring logs and stumps? Because we look at it as coarse woody debris for marten's habitat. If it's a clean forest, you're not going to have certain species there. They need that cover. So do the small ones. They need that cover. So it all comes together. It all balances itself. You know, we don't have a lot of Canada U on the mainland too. So it's, you know, otherwise it would just get mowed down by deer, you know, it's like candy to deer. But, so going back to the bear stuff, another one is that they're part of, you know, strength and courage. And I got taught that lesson. I had to have courage to go back out in the woods again. And I don't know why, I see a lot of animals. I have this thing, they come up to me, And I was by myself, and I finally realized until I get over that fear, I can't work by myself. Because it would take me twice or 3 times as long to do the job. And sure enough, that first time I was back out there in 2016, I heard something through the woods, and I'm like, don't even tell me. And I looked over, and I see a bear. I'm like, nope, nope, nope. And I went back to my truck, and I was like, I'm calling it a day, because I'm not going to be able to focus. And I was like, why? Why are these bears coming up to me? But so I had to learn those lessons, you know, and, you know, have that courage to go back out and work with others and be able to see bears and feel comfortable again, and, you know, and so. But yeah, it's amazing how other species don't have that kind of an effect on me that bears do, you know. I still haven't been, you know, fortunate enough to see brown bears, grizzlies yet. I think that would be amazing. I did sign up, I applied for a job one year, I think it was in 2015 or something, to work with polar bears. Like they provide all the equipment or whatever. I'm like, why not? That's the biggest bear there is, you know. And those ones aren't eating plants. So, but they talk about all the research, and I looked up the research, and yeah, it was amazing. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of other people in other cultures, not just tribal cultures within our own state, in our own country, but other from Canada, other people, other cultures from around the world. They have bears as their ambassadors or their totems, or, you know, and there's many different views of like what the bear can symbolize. And I've had to learn over the years, and I'm still being taught lessons, what the bear means to me, you know, and I wish I got to work with them. And hopefully one day I'd like to do the thing in October again. But a lot of it's just like you start with the plant beings, learning strength and the courage to do things, and you apply that to your own life. And that's what it took me a while to learn that. And I've chosen to move on to a different career path and going into psychology. And people are like, what does psychology have to do with wildlife? And I think everyone should take psychology 100. It's how we think, how we view each other, how we view other cultures, you know, and understanding our own behaviors, our own pasts. And I'm still learning about it. And it's, you know, been an amazing journey. And I want to eventually get into a master's program. I'm not sure where yet, because I'm still at the beginning stages of it. But look at eco-psychology and ecotherapy as they, you know, getting people back in touch with nature. Like, trust me, I am a TikTok addict. I have to control myself and be like, don't scroll on TikTok, don't laugh at funny videos, whatever, and just like push the phone away. And, you know, we have our technology. I'm a gamer. And I'd hear this at meetings, at professional meetings all the time, like, well, the video games, they're ruining kids today. I'm like, hey, I'm a gamer. I'm pretty good too. But I play old games, you know, like Skyrim was like 15 years old now or something like that. I'm so nerdy, I still have the book from Skyrim. I love dragons and all that stuff. But anyways, getting away from it. But like technology, as amazing as it is, but it also pulls us away from that instinct, that nature, that connection, and getting out there into it and learning, you know, and that's what I learned I've had to do. And I still like my technology though, as we all do. And I'm glad I was able to come down here for this, because we got a wicked snowstorm. The UP just gets dumped on, especially this winter with snow. We had a 3-day storm like before Christmas, and my husky just loves it. And anyone who wants to meet my husky after class, she's in the car she's 75-pound Siberian, and a 10-pound Shih Tzu. The Shih Tzu runs the house, so, but they're great. And, you know, because of spring break, all the kennels were full, so I had to bring them down with me. So they're in the car just waiting for me. But anyways, I digress. Getting back to bears, and, you know, in our culture too, we have, everything comes in 4s. You know, people hear the 4 directions. Well, we need the 4 directions when we're navigating through the woods, but the 4 directions in the Ojibwe culture means something different. It's like we start, you know, the east, south, everything goes clockwise to the west and to the north. And when you go back to the east, you make that last crossover when you walk on or pass away. You go straight from the east to the west, your last setting sun. You're born from your first rising sun. And each direction has different, the different parts of your life associated with it as well. And it's like, you know, the north has our different colors. You know, the north is white. And, you know, your hair starts to turn white. And, you know, like as you go through these travels, there's also, you know, everything comes in fours, the 4 directions, the 4 sacred herbs. I don't know if anyone's heard of those. We offer tobacco to the Great Spirit. So there's tobacco, cedar, sage, and sweetgrass. And so everything's in 4s. And, you know, I smudged myself this morning, and I always have cedar on me. I have my pouch that I always keep on me too with all the 4 sacred herbs for travel, for anything, to keep, you know, spirit guiding me and protect me. Also, 4 directions. Oh, the one I've been like definitely teaching people, which I think relates to ecology, is the 4 emotional parts of our being, the 4 states of our being. So we have the intellectual in school. We're learning from each other, we're learning from others, we're learning from our elders. And, you know, teachers, professors, everything, you know. And so we have the intellectual, we have the physical, you know, and the physical, we just went through this massive like thing of COVID, which is still here, but, you know, we physically couldn't be together. Like, and that affected people like drastically. I know it affected me, I lived alone during it. And and that, without that physical and the intellectual, and we had to learn to do everything online, or some of us older ones had to learn to do everything online. But, and then you have your emotional, that affects your emotional state. So I think definitely some of this stuff has to relate from my culture, what I do, into therapy, you know, and ecologically based therapy or psychology. And then the spiritual. You know, everyone has their different views and their different viewpoints. This culture, this is my spirituality. And as I relate to these beings. And, you know, to kind of bring it back full circle with, you know, I didn't talk a whole lot about bears, but it's not, you can't just talk about one species without talking about all of the beings. I mean, that's, I think, part of my main point is that it's not just, you can't talk about one species as it relates to everything else. I mean, because they have to relate to everything else as well. And when I was a biologist, I looked at that as that I don't manage over these things. I'm not a wildlife manager, and I don't rule over these things. And I had a different view on it. And, you know, I know what I learned, you know, especially when I was in undergrad and stuff, is like, you know, this different, there's like a top-down approach of like the humans, we make all these decisions that reside over everything else. And I never saw it that way. I saw it as, well, we're from the bottom. Like the top order is the earth, wind, the water, and the fire. Without any of that, none of this would be here. And we want all of those to be healthy and clean. You know, so you can't think about one species as it relates to everything else, especially you go back to the basics. So that's the first tier. The second tier are all the plant beings. You know, your mushrooms, everything in the water, the seaweed, trees, shrubs, the little mushrooms, fungus, lichens, everything. You know, they all depend on the first order to be healthy and clean, so they can grow healthy. Then you've got the next tier. Then you have all your insects, your bears, your fisher, otter, bobcat, the fish, the sharks, the whales, everything. That's all in the third tier, because they depend on the first tier, and then they depend on each other and the very first one, to have clean water, clean food, clean soil, clean plants, you know, to eat, clean berries to eat. So we're actually at the bottom, how I see it. It's like my responsibility is to take care of those things above me, because without any of them, we don't exist. And so that's how I saw it, was that I don't rule over these things. even though that's what we do in some of these meetings and management plans and whatever, I don't like that viewpoint of it. It's like, it seemed kind of backwards to me that our responsibility is to take care of them because we rely on them for food and to keep our house warm, to have a house, you know, so, but that's kind of how I wanted to end my talk. Just, miigwech, thank you.
I think we've got time for questions. So what we'll do is, what we'll need you to do is if you can just repeat the question.
Okay, is it going to be on the computer?
No,
Oh.
but for people who are on YouTube, they can ask questions.
Oh, okay.
But we can also have people ask in the room. It's just people on the computer won't be able to hear anyone in the audience.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, questions for Tanya?
Wow, I covered everything.
There's not a single question.
Don't be afraid. It's okay. Ask anything. Or nothing.
No, I have a question for
Yeah.
you. What I liked about how you started your talk was how you first started your talk by talking about conventional Western science. Like
Right.
you came in here and said, "I am a scientist."
Right,
And then you said, "I am a tribal member."
right.
How hard has it been for you to put those two things together?
Seriously, I struggled with it for years. I always thought they were separate. Like there was two parts of me, these two different hats I would wear. That's how I would look at it. And it's taken a while to become comfortable to, oh, sorry. I got to repeat the question. So she was, sorry, I forgot that part. Dr. Sartini asked, you know, how, for people online, that when I came in here, when I first talked, I talked about being a scientist, my background, kind of academia, what I went through, like Western culture. Then, well, but I introduced myself in Ojibwe, and then I kind of weave it in and out, and then end with the Ojibwe. Well, I mean, that's kind of our society is, right? And it's been, and how have I dealt with that transition? So, and it's taken years. I finally more comfortable with it because especially like the time period I grew up in, it was, you know, I would go to powwows and stuff like that. But I thought when you're little, that's what everyone does, you know? And I'd hear about ceremonies. I just thought everyone did that, you know? And I had quite an experience of, when I was younger, we went to a Catholic boarding school. And it was one of the Indian boarding schools from back in the day. And people don't realize that, no, it's not just the elders that went through it. I was right at the end of that. And I went there for 2 years before they closed the school for funding. Well, it was abuse. And when I went there, it was Mexicans, African Americans, and natives that stayed there. And all the Caucasian kids got to go home. But when you're in 6, 7 years old, you just think that's how the world functions, and that's okay. And it wasn't, because though I've been dealing with trauma from that. I mean, just our culture alone has been healing from the trauma of the assimilation that took place. My mother was not allowed to speak a word of her native language without getting expelled from school. That's how fresh it is. That's how new it is. And so it makes sense that I'm just finally, as an adult, I'm still adulting, by the way. I got a mohawk, so I younged it up a little bit, and I still game or whatever. But no, it's taken me a while to become comfortable with that and understand that, of course, no one's given a handbook of like how to live life and in these two different worlds. And we're all in the same world, and how to communicate with each other, I think, is really important. So I'm still on that journey, but obviously getting more comfortable with it. So, yes.
How do you think people in this area in Wisconsin can better support the indigenous communities in the state?
Well, definitely getting involved in your communities, or like anything that you're like live near, whatever. I think, what are we closest to here? Menominee? Ho-Chunk? Yeah, and so like going to, like there's stuff on Facebook now or, you know, I know some of the younger ones don't use Facebook anymore. I just heard that in another class. I'm like, what? I still use it, and I still got a MySpace, I think. No, no, I don't. But you know, just definitely getting involved that way. There's a lot of things that they put on Facebook of like, or going to the reservation. They have like flyers up of different classes that are being held, language classes, food classes, beading, whatever, you know. So you have to get, there's no flyers for ceremonies, you know what I mean? I mean, there's powwows and stuff. You got to get to know the people within the community to get involved that way at that level. So.
There is a question from YouTube.
Yep.
So a question is, they ask, you are from the Bear Clan, and what is your color? And how has that guided you in your journey?
My color. So, I don't have a color per se. I was given colors during my naming ceremony. I don't know if that's what they're talking about. Yeah, so I was given colors so that my first regalia, maybe that's what they're talking about if they're Ojibwe. I don't have like one specific color, but I was given color during my naming ceremony. That was the question. And so I was given 4 colors. And so I had to incorporate those 4 colors in my first regalia that I danced in. So I got named in 2005, and I didn't dance till 2015. So I had plenty of time to like figure out my regalia, you know, and I incorporated, made sure all those colors were my first colors. And then after that, you still have your first regalia, but then you can choose your colors after that. I think that's what they're talking about, but I don't have a one color. But.
Yeah, because they followed up with how has it guided you in your journey? Your colors.
I think the colors, the way the colors are set up with the 4, everything is in 4. There's some of it starts from the earth, and then it goes up from there. And that's how I've seen it, of like what colors are closest to the earth and what colors are closest to the sky. And so that's how, I mean, most of my TikToks and Facebook even, everything is outdoors and outdoors related. That's where I'm most comfortable and feel good at.
So I'll just read their follow-up comment quick, and then there's another comment from, or question from YouTube. So question asker said, although I am English, I have been studying a book written by Sun Bear, and I'm amazed at how accurate the colors are associated with the birthday.
Huh. Yeah, that's something new I'm not familiar with. I mean, and every culture, I'm not familiar with that book either. What's it called? Sun Bear?
He says it's a study book written by Sun Bear.
Okay. Yeah, so I would have to look that book up. I'm not as familiar, you know, with that particular, different colors mean different things to different people, but I've never received that teaching, you know, so I can only tell you what it means to me. So that's what a lot of it, like kind of like in class, we're given a teaching, I'm giving you guys a teaching, but it's from my perspective and what I've experienced. Now someone else might have experienced something different, so they associate those colors with their experience, and you know, yeah, that's how I would answer that. But I'm not as familiar. And I'm sure many different cultures have different colors representing different animals, and specifically that I'm not as familiar with. Yep. Oh yeah, I wanted to cover the ones online because then we can talk afterwards because we have to leave by 5.
Okay, sorry, yes. So one more from the YouTube. Is there a movement to teach Ojibwe language again? Are there cultural traditions that foster the learning of the language?
Yes. The question was if there's a movement to teach Ojibwe language again, and there is. There's multiple Ojibwe colleges, community colleges, and they have language classes. other universities, I don't know if you do here or not. I'm not as familiar with Stevens Point, but at Northern Michigan University, I don't know if it's at Michigan State or not. It's been a long time. But where I'm at, they have Ojibwe 1, 2, 3, I think. And the thing about the language too, and like where I worked at, we have Ojibwe teachers, and we'd have classes, you know, and once a week, and then there's an advanced class. The one thing about the language is like I'm not fluent in it. It's like I had to learn. I know bits and pieces. I know equivalent of like maybe a 4-year-old or 5-year-old. I know colors and animals and things, but how to put it all together, it's a little tricky. But the thing about like any language, you got to practice it, and you got to practice it with others that are fluent, or you know, learning Ojibwe as well, and someone that's fluent in it. But yeah, but it's getting taught more, definitely. Yes. Oh, sorry. Any more? Nope. Okay, good.
Just to add to that, for anyone who's close to it, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee has Ojibwe.
Okay.
I think they do 4 semesters on it.
Oh, wow.
So that's something.
Yeah, it's like kind of interspersed here and there, you know. There's a question over here. Yes.
So have you been met with like any backlash within your career path because of your beliefs? Like, have you had any people that you've had to deal with that you had to like explain to, you know, this is why I do this way or whatever? Like,
Yeah, I mean, you know, so as a biologist, you know, I'd sit at these meetings, and sometimes it was hard for me because, you know, well, especially what I went through with the wolf stuff, it was really just emotionally taxing on me. I had to walk out of some meetings because I never worked with a species that had such vast range of views, from wolf huggers to wolf haters. And it was just unbelievable. And some of the wolf hater side, I just had a hard time with it. And I just have to bite my tongue, be professional, and if I couldn't hold my emotions, I left the room. Or I'd just put the headphones down, because everything was, you know, Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and stuff. And I just had to walk away from it and just regather myself, because that connection is very deep. And when I graduated in 2011, and I was put on the bear committee that deal with the bear hunters in the state, and where I represented Gliffwick at these bear meetings, and I couldn't take it. I was like, this is way too close, and I, you know, just, and just the way some people talk about animals that have passed on, or dead animals, or killing them, or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it was pretty hard. And so I met with some backlash when, you know, of people that, you know, have those opposite views, and you have to learn how to communicate with them and listen to what their views are. I mean, to a certain point, someone's just like, oh, like blatantly they have their views, they're ignorant about it, they don't want to hear it. Don't even bother engaging with that person. That's what I had to learn from. But someone that wants to have a different debate about it, I'm fine with having that kind of discussion, for sure. And that I can handle when it's done in a, you know, educational and calm way, and to discuss it. And but I've been at meetings too where like I start talking about my feelings and how the tribes view things, and, you know, in a general sense, I get eye rolls and whatever. So, and you're gonna get that. It's just, yeah.
kind of the opposite side of that question, as you, like in your indigenous community, have you received pushback for being on the science side of things? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, I've gotten that too. And, you know, some people are like, you know, yeah, I always want to be careful not to step into ceremony stuff. That's different. That's a little bit more sacred. That's for other people to teach. I teach as it relates to me with being an Ojibwe Tribal Member, and kind of like the basics, you know, and that level, and my direct experiences and what they meant to me. It's like, no one rules over what I can say about my experiences except me, you know, and, but yeah, I mean, you got to be careful with some of that stuff, you know, and be respectful, definitely. And yeah.
So we have time for about 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll move into the lobby.
Yeah. Yes.
How do we as future wildlife managers kind of come to the point where we're combining indigenous knowledge and spirituality with our management decisions?
Well, the tribes will be at the meetings, definitely. I mean, they will. And, you know, the one important thing, you know, and I learned this, you know, that you'll be at meetings, and some people, some groups, interest groups, like the tribes are not an interest group. They are not a stakeholder. They are an entity that governs themselves. So that's what tribal sovereignty is all about. And that's important to remember. It's like they don't have to, you know, hope to get a seat at the table. They have a seat at the table. So that's important to remember. And their viewpoints should be respected. Is like because, and you might run into some people that have that animosity from our history. It's like, yeah, we weren't allowed to have this viewpoint for a while and voice it. So it's been, you know, a shift, especially a generational shift, you know, too. And so I got to respect my elders as well. But yeah. So being at those meetings and when they're talking, yeah, take it seriously. And, you know, you don't have to view exactly what they view, but just respect it. Just like, you know, with religion, you know, like Catholicism. I went to Catholic boarding school. Not a fan of it. But, you know, I've had, you know, friends or whatever that during Christmas, and like I have a Christmas tree because I grew up with one, you know, or Easter, they want to go to Easter church on Easter Day or, you know, Christmas Eve or something like that. And I go with them. You know, I can appreciate that. And it's like, just as long as someone's not trying to push your viewpoints on them and vice versa. I don't try to do that either.
Okay, so we're gonna, if there are any